Hello, welcome. Excited to have you guys all here. We're going to hold off on starting for just a moment while we let everyone hop on. In the meantime, open up the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. And while we wait for everyone to hop on, I'm also going to launch a really quick poll. I'd love to know what areas have been the most challenging for your organization when it comes to building a strong company culture. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that real quick. Okay, if you guys open up the poll, you should be able to see that and vote. Would love to hear if there's anything that's not in the poll that you feel like is a factor that's been challenging. Also, feel free to drop that in the chat. Awesome. Well, we're a minute past, so I'm just going to hop right in. Hey, everyone, and welcome to our new event series called HR GameChangers. This is a multi-theme, multi-episode series, and today is our second episode. We are talking about how to build a thriving culture and strategies for success. If you have peers or colleagues who would like to join the series, please share the registration link with them. I'm going to drop that in the chat real quick for you guys so you have it. But yeah, you can take that, send it to your colleagues, your friends, so they can join us for the next episode. And on another note, we're going to have a live Q&A time at the end of the webinar. So if you think of any questions throughout the webinar, save those, throw them in the chat at the end, and I'll hand them over to our panel. So now let's get into some introductions. My name is Alexa Frank. I am the Senior Content Manager here at GoProfiles, a GoLinks company. GoProfiles is an AI employee engagement, recognition, and rewards platform. Joining me, I have some amazing people leaders. First, we have Charlie Safro, who's the Chief Executive Officer at CS Recruiting. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Next, we have Radina Welsh, a people advisor at Vox Advisory. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from sunny Dublin, Ireland.
Love the accent. Love it. Next, we have we have, to round out the panel, we have Joey Lim, a learning consultant at Life Labs Learning.
Hello, everyone. Super excited to be here as well.
Welcome. We're excited to have you guys here. So moving on, here at GoProfiles, we believe in the importance of a strong company culture, and that's why we've built an AI people platform that improves the employee experience and drives engagement. And that's also why we're hosting this webinar series on the topic of employee engagement and company culture. So panel, real quick, I'd love to hear your thoughts on company culture tools like this and how have they helped you in your role?
I can start. So I am the CEO of a third-party recruiting firm. We have about 30 employees on our team, and we are a remote organization. As a recruiter, I have interesting insight because I talk to a lot of hiring companies and job seekers. So most of what I'm going to share is applied to my own business that I've kind of built and really designed the culture through best practices, through a lot of observation. So sorry, I just forgot. The question is, what defines a culture?
Just how has company culture tools helped you in your role?
Okay. So as a remote organization, they keep us connected. And I think the decision to implement these tools has got to be top down, but then the encouragement to keep the momentum and using them comes from the entire company when they start to see the value. So I'm a fan of them.
Yeah, I can chime in as well. I think that one of the things with culture is that culture is made from the beliefs and behaviors and values that we have in an organization and those written and unwritten rules, right? And so these tools, I think, are these reinforcers of what we want people to do, say, behave, et cetera. So they're a great way to help people be in line with what we want our culture to be, instead of just relying on day-to-day habits or behaviors. So I like these as reinforcer systems.
Yes, yeah, great points. Love to hear that. Moving on, so similar to our last webinar episode, we're going to kick things off today with some stats that are quite shocking, I think. So 85% of employees are disengaged due to poor culture, and a poor culture can lead to a 26% reduction in productivity. On top of that, 34% of employees leave their job due to poor culture. So would anyone on the panel want to share any thoughts on these stats? Like, what are you guys currently seeing in the industry today?
Oh, I'm happy to jump in this one. I love to be the devil's advocate. First of all, these are staggering numbers. And in all honesty, I think, particularly when it comes to the poor workplace culture, I think it's even bigger percentage than that, because I've experienced it myself. When you're in an organization where at some stage you feel that nothing that you do can make a difference, and you feel lost, and you're not the only one in that journey. So it can be incredibly detrimental. 34% of the employees leave their jobs voluntarily. I'd say that's even bigger. And particularly after COVID, I think there was a silver lining around, and I'm speaking a lot about Europe in particular, because that's my domain, and I work a lot with Middle East and Africa. So what I have noticed, particularly in terms of the clients I work with, and these are small and medium-sized structures, they have a massive change in terms of employee motivation, employee engagement, and people voluntarily leaving their company if they feel that they're not appreciated, they're not recognized, or they're just in the wrong company at the wrong time. So yeah, I would say that these numbers are even bigger outside of the States.
I will also add, as a recruiter, most people assume that job seekers call us because they just want more money and they're looking for a higher salary or a better incentive plan. But really, the reason job seekers are often looking for new opportunities, and I'm talking mostly passive job seekers who are employed, it's about culture. They may not come out and say, I want a better culture, but what they describe is exactly what Joey mentioned. They want to feel rewarded. They want to feel invested in. They want to feel respected. They want to have the right tools and resources to do their job well. And in my mind, that is what makes up a company culture, all those things that are created collaboratively as the business grows. So I feel very strong in saying, like, this is what job seekers want. I think we started to get on the right track after the pandemic. With the Great Resignation, companies were really in check thinking about what they could offer. And with the turn in the market, I feel like the focus has slipped a little bit. And I believe these numbers. And it's very scary to think, of a room of 10 people and to know 8.5 of them are not even engaged or happy to be there.
Yeah, such good points. In a moment, we're going to jump into some questions that address all these current problems. But first, here's a quick look at our discussion points today. So we're going to be covering the role of culture and experience functions, best practices for fostering inclusivity and diversity, the importance of recognition and reward software, and just rewards and recognition in general, how to encourage open communication and feedback, and then strategies for improving culture and workplace productivity. Real quick, for anyone who's hopped on late, please remember, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, post them in the chat during our Q&A time, which will be at the end, and I'll make sure to pass those over to our panel. But let's dive into some discussion points. I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen real quick. So the first question that we have, why is inclusivity and diversity important for a thriving workplace culture today? Whoever wants to jump in.
I will answer. When I think about the way we operate as humans, we tend to surround ourselves with people that look like us, think like us, maybe act like us. You think of the community you live in, the school you send your kids to, the religious organization you're part of, and that's comforting and that's great, and how we choose to, build our own community. But work is where we can be exposed to other ideas, to people from other backgrounds, other perspectives. And when I really reflect on my career, that is where I've learned the most about other cultures. One business reason it's so important is like innovation. I mean, people, you don't want to just keep hiring the same profile over that's going to have the same experience and ideas. You want people to come in with fresh perspectives. And a lot of those perspectives go back to who they are as a person, how they were raised, where they were born. So I just think it's something we take for granted maybe, but the workplace is a great opportunity beyond compliance. There are so many other reasons why it's beneficial, and it can really add a lot of value. I always tell my clients that they're not looking for someone who's going to fit in the culture. They're looking for someone who can add to the culture.
I love that, Turley. And I would definitely agree in terms of not only on an individual level, but also on a business level. There are so many important aspects of why diversity, equity, and inclusion are important, not only, but essential. And I think from an individual perspective, we spend so much of our time at work, and just based on like how we are as human beings, it's so important for us to feel a sense of belonging. That's such a vital part of just what makes us feel safe and part of something bigger and engaged with what we're doing. When we feel exclusion, it actually triggers a part of our brain that feels pain. And so if we're in a workplace that makes us feel excluded or makes us feel like we're alone, that can have such a detrimental effect, not only on how we do our work, but just also as who we are as human beings. And from the business perspective, there was a study done back, I think it was in 2013, that actually showed that businesses who leverage the strength of their differences see 45% more revenue growth than those that don't, which was a pretty staggering statistic. But it is true, like we have so much opportunity for innovation when we are exposed to different perspectives, and being able to leverage all of the diversity that we bring into a room is so important for being able to see innovation, creativity, inspiration within the workplace. So yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important.
Yeah, it was so good. I love that you shared a stat too, Joey, because I feel like I've seen a lot of stats just around how much of an impact these things have. I am curious though, if you guys are doing anything to measure the impact of inclusivity and diversity on like overall company performance, or have you guys tracked that in the past?
We track it through our employee engagement survey that we issue quarterly. So there's definitely questions that, are specifically around that topic. I would say it's something we are always looking to enhance. Like there's so many different ways we can create a better sense of belonging and inclusivity, and, whether it's with our hiring or within our culture, the people on our team. So always top of mind, but I'd say that's where we get the best gauge of how not necessarily a quota or metrics, but how do our employees feel? Do they feel like they are welcome and belong here?
Nice. Yeah, that's great. Surveys are so helpful. Moving on to the next question, I'm curious, what are some effective ways to recognize and reward employees? What have you seen be successful?
I can jump in this one. I think one area that we really need to be mindful of is incorporating a multi-generational approach. And I know that sounds easier than it is actually. It's actually a very complicated approach, but the way things have changed in the last 10 years has been accelerated so much by technology, by perception of work. And it's very easy to point fingers as, oh, that's Gen Z, or baby boomers are coming out of the workforce, and millennials are this and this. People are used to putting labels. But my point is, when it comes to reward and recognition, and I'm actually teaching this module now, funny enough, in my business lectures with one college, one thing that has made companies successful is really taking into consideration what the employees need and understanding what the different types of employees need. So whether you have white and blue collars, because we can talk about tech a lot, and we can talk about huge budgets as well, but coming from my world, I work with smaller structures that don't have the same resources like the likes of Amazon, Google, and Netflix, right? So they have to be much more scrappy, much more inventive as to understanding what we can utilize, how we can utilize it, what we can do better. And the good thing is that they're agile. They can move very swiftly and they can make mistakes. They can afford to make mistakes, because if you start introducing Workday and a number of recognition systems, that takes months, ages, right? But with these small companies, what I found pretty fascinating is that they do a lot of trials. They test, they ask for feedback from their employees, like a very open stream feedback loop, and then they make decision based on that, which I totally understand in larger structure that would probably be very time consuming and resourceful approach. But I really do believe that there isn't a global frame for rewards. Yes, we're motivated as humans, we're motivated by similar things. However, it really depends from one industry to another as to what would work well. And if you don't trial, you would never know. When I came to Ireland, 12 years ago, and I joined LinkedIn, they had a thing called per cup. And it was for basically, it was amount of money that you can utilize. Sorry, I mentioned the name of the company, but probably they don't have it anymore. So yeah, we don't know. So the funny thing is that it was amount of money, but it was spread into two options. For those with families, they can use it for subsidizing their creche for their child or children. And for those that are single or don't have a family as of this stage, they can use it for expanding massages and going to the spa. So it was exactly the same amount of money, but we knew very well that it's serving to very different needs. So that was pretty fascinating to me. I was like, okay, spa every weekend. So yeah, that was my example.
I love that. And I think that the approach of really understanding what each demographic or individual needs is a really great way to look at reward and recognition. I also don't want to oversimplify things, but I really think that the power of feedback is underutilized. Giving positive feedback in the moment when we see people doing things that are worth recognizing, I think is such an important way to demonstrate this is what we want you to be doing more of. This is what we want other people to be doing more of. And so using tools like GoProfiles, I'm guessing that you have something like this, to amplify performance through the power of social proof and social learning, where we see other people doing things well, we see them being recognized for that. It has such a profound impact on what we want to do and what kind of is contagious in the best way of contagion. So I do think that giving positive feedback in the moment and making sure that we're doing it on an individual, like private level, but also on a more public level can really help amplify behavior.
Joey, I love that you mentioned that, because that's something I think is a really important, that it's not just the big wins. Like, we're very quick to provide negative feedback or constructive criticism if there's a mistake, but when it comes to rewards and appreciation and acknowledgement, it usually is like the big win. Like, you either got it or you didn't. So we love to look at these little wins along the way. And I think, when I think back to my journey, I was a solopreneur for my first year in business. And then I slowly started to add to my team. I didn't have a budget. I wasn't even mindful about creating a culture. But as, something that I just chose to do was write cards to my employees, and I drop them in the mail every so often, certainly for like an anniversary, but also just like hey, I appreciate you. And what's amazing is now 14 years later, we have a culture of caring and a culture of appreciation. We have a more formal system now, but when I see our team members shouting each other out, and really, it's so simple. And I think a lot of times, like, it doesn't have to be a huge budget. It's just the intention. One other thing I'll mention is, if you've heard of the 5 love languages, there's a sister book, the 5 workplace appreciation languages. And it's fascinating. Now, I'm not saying huge companies would test every single employee and cater to their needs, but for instance, like, I know my right hand team member wants quality time with me. Like, she doesn't want a bonus. She doesn't want a gift. She doesn't need me to praise her publicly on LinkedIn. She just wants to spend time. And so when you know that about yourself and each other, it really makes a difference. And I encourage companies to actually think about all those ways we appreciate and what can you do in each category. If you have that information on someone, what would you do to offer more quality time or words of affirmation and so on. So it's a fun time. You learn a lot about yourself too.
Yeah.
Love that. Those are all great tips. Love that you all shared just different ways that you can appreciate employees. So moving on to a new question, how can organizations encourage open communication and feedback? And what are some tools or platforms you've used to facilitate this sort of feedback?
I can start. I guess transparency is something that needs to be embedded, but it's a top-down approach. And I think particularly when it comes to communication, unfortunately, even in small companies, if the communication is one-sided, if it's happening only to certain people, and you explain this with confidentiality or we don't know what's going to happen, this creates a massive drop in how people perceive the organization, how people engage with the company and with the values. So I think transparency is first. But the issue with that is that fear, on the other hand, is a very, very strong emotion that a lot of the leaders experience, particularly when it comes to communicating, whether it's their own style, their leadership style, whether it's how they talk about the organization, being very mindful as not to revealing too much yet, being friendly and being welcoming. I have an example that really stands with me until now, and that's 8 years later. Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb. And during my time there, I've always thought he's such an inspirational guy, and he's also so straight to the point and down to earth. I don't know if it's because he's an engineer by education and heart, or is it just his approach? But every single time we had all hands, he always started with a personal story and jumped straight to the point. No sugarcoating, no fluff. Which was highly unlikely, right? You're not used to that. I mean, we in Eastern Europe are very cynical, and sugarcoating is the opposite of how we perceive things. And furthermore, when they had to go through this very awful exercise of laying offs in 2021, I believe, the beginning of 2021, they were one of the first ones. And they had to cut quite substantial amount of people. So this is impacting the culture. I know we have a topic around that, but I feel it's relevant here as well. The letter he wrote, this is an example of how things should be handled in challenging, critical, volatile times.
Great example. It all starts with transparency, communication, and making that effort.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add on to that, because I really do think that in order for us to feel safe enough to be transparent, there does have to be some psychological safety within the organization. And I think that that's honestly one of the things that I run into with most of my clients is this overarching kind of lack of psychological safety within the organization that's prohibiting not only leaders from being transparent, but also just employees. I work with an organization right now who's struggling with the battle of passive aggressive behavior, and how, they'll be in a meeting and everyone's agreeing to a point, and then after the meeting, they kind of go off and they're like, oh, I didn't really like that point, and now we want to do something different. And that's a really big challenge for many organizations that struggle with poor workplace culture. And I'm hesitant to kind of create that overarching view of poor workplace, because I think there's some cultures where there's bits and pieces that are positive, and then there's bits and pieces that they struggle with. But I think one of the things that it can be really helpful for creating a very strong feedback culture and also just general open communication culture is making sure that people have a trust built between employees, and that there is that sense of there's not going to be that retribution or the feeling like, oh, if I say so-and-so, if I feel like they're wrong, there's going to be some kind of tension or whatnot. that's a very difficult thing to build within an organization. And I think a lot of the times we want this very clear-cut system. This is how we do it. This is what we can do. And oftentimes it's a very complex thing that we have to handle. And it can be from an individual level of really training people with specific skills that they can use in those environments to have more productive conflict conversations, to be able to increase trust on a personal level, on a work level as well. Being able to give feedback that is receivable. So really knowing how to structure a feedback conversation that the other person, that's brain friendly for the other person. But then also the systems at play and making sure that leaders are exemplifying that behavior as well. Because I think so much exactly with what Radina was saying, which is it all starts at the top. If we see leaders not sharing transparent communication or not having difficult conversations well, that can have a huge trickle down effect on how the rest of the organization behaves. So really making sure that your leadership team knows how to do those things well and does it publicly enough where it's very visible to other people, I think is so important.
I think that is such a good point. And I think when we reflect, we're never taught how to give feedback. It's easy to praise someone and tell them they're great, but it has to start with leadership, and it may have to be a training. It's a really uncomfortable place to be unless you're a confrontational person and you love those types of conversations. But we make a lot of space for feedback, and I'd say that's one of our ways at creating this speak up culture. We have an anonymous survey, and it's very interesting what comes out when it's anonymous versus when it's not anonymous, but you need that as a safety check. We use an employee engagement platform where our employees are filling out questions based on how they're feeling and their pulse for the week, and their managers are discussing those questions. Certainly we have annual reviews, we have meetings to talk about their careers. So I think that is probably one of my best learnings is it's up to leaders to make dedicated space for these conversations. I'll also share one tip because as a non-confrontational person, this has helped me deliver feedback many times. And I learned it from a friend. It's called the FBI model. And so it is feelings, behavior, impact. And the concept is when you start a conversation by sharing your feelings, nobody can argue, Alexa, I am feeling uneasy because of the way you showed up in that meeting, and I'm concerned the client saw it too. You really didn't, Alexa. You did a great job. But that point of you can't argue with me saying I'm uneasy or disappointed or angry or whatever. So I don't know, that's a good takeaway because every time I have to go into that conversation, and you can use it for positive feedback too, but it really helps guide me through getting that constructive feedback out.
I love that. I haven't heard of the FBI method before. I'll have to remember that. I also like what you guys said on just to get feedback, you have to create an environment where people want to give feedback. They feel comfortable giving feedback. So those are great points. Kind of along the same vein, how do you guys think organizations can create a more inclusive and diverse workplace culture? And what are some specific policies or practices that you guys have found effective for this?
We simply just take the time to get to know our employees behind their title. That's a really big thing for us. As a leader, I meet with everyone 2 to 3 times a year for 20 minutes, and I start the conversation by saying, this is not a performance review. I don't even have any of your metrics in front of me. How are you? How was your weekend? What do you have coming up? What's going on in your life that you're comfortable sharing with me? It's so simple, but I do think when you become educated and curious about others, then it just becomes part of the culture and way of being. One other thing that we do, and again, as a smaller company, once a quarter in our team status meeting, we have somebody bring in an idea to talk about their culture, the way they were raised. And some people share recipes, some people show family pictures or videos. And even people who come from, maybe the same place were raised so differently with different values and ethics. And it started there. So I don't know, it's a little something, but it has added a lot. And I could tell you, I know a lot more about the team members that have presented something. And there's what I know about them, if nothing else, behind their title. I know where they came from.
Charlie, if all leaders are like you, the world would be a great place. Honestly,
It's only
fantastic.
taken me 14 years to figure it out. I still haven't figured it out. You've always got to be working on it.
Absolutely, and better late than never. Some people never learn, even though they have great titles. I guess to add to everything that Charlie said, being a psychologist, I'm always interested in what people perceive as inclusion and diversity and belonging, because people have different perceptions, and I see it's a regional thing. I see that sometimes people perceive it only as a compliance ticking box exercise. There was a lot of discussion in Europe lately around male-female ratio, and it was taken to a level that you can potentially fall into another trap, which is positive discrimination. And Charlie said awareness, getting to know people is step one. Absolutely. I actually was teaching, working in multicultural teams last year with my students, and these are business students from all over the globe. And one thing that I brought as example is you really need to understand how to navigate and how to engage your curiosity. Because if you're not curious, if you're not eager to know the other party, regardless of whether it's culture, race, or anything else, any kind of factor, if you don't nurture this curiosity, you would go into, okay, these are the people I like, these are the people I feel comfortable with, my comfort zone, and this is how silos are created. So I actually brought some negative examples of toxic cultures and issues with people to my students, not to scare them, but yes, to scare them, because ultimately we live in a global village, and it's fascinating how quickly we can create a perception of something. And you need to also nurture this voice in your head as a leader and as a practitioner, as an employee. The first 3 minutes are not the kind of minutes that you should make judgments based on. You need to give the other person time. You need to give yourself time to understand the different standpoints. But if you don't have the awareness and the curiosity, I mean, yeah, why are you bothering?
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I do think that curiosity is one of the most fundamental parts about being able to enable a inclusive and diverse workforce. One of the things that I think I see with my clients is many of them struggle with kind of the chicken and the egg problem, is like they want to create a really diverse workplace. They want to bring more diversity into their workplace, but then they don't necessarily have the inclusive culture to make their employees feel a sense of belonging. And that is a very difficult challenge, because that's where you see a lot of attrition, right? And you're going to end up having a situation where you can't retain the employees that you want in order to create that diverse workplace. So I do think that the first thing is to establish those behaviors and systems that really enable inclusion and belonging. And at Life Labs, we talk a lot about that. We have specific workshops that are actually focused on enabling individuals to be more inclusive with the way that we conduct meetings and the way that we pull people into the conversation, and what we call opening the circle, and also having cultural humility. But then there's also the systems part, which is making sure that our systems enable inclusion. So, we talk a little bit about what does your promotion system look like, how we're making sure that that is fair, and making sure that it is equitable. And then all the way to the hiring system, which I think, and Charlie, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this as well, but I think really making sure that you have a very inclusive and fair hiring process is so important in order to make sure that you are bringing in diverse talent, and not necessarily measuring people on only background and experience, because that can actually have a negative impact when we all come from different walks of life where we don't necessarily have the same access to resources. So making sure that our hiring systems actually measure for skills that we need on the job versus, oh, you went to Harvard and you did this and you did that, which can sometimes negatively or exclude some individuals that might still have the skills that they need. So yeah, making sure people have that training and making sure that your systems are built inclusively.
I would add to that, Joey, and I love how you touched on recruiting. I can't not comment. But I work in a very male-dominated industry of logistics and transportation, and one of our client sectors is a very saturated market. The easiest way to say it is a lot of these companies look and feel like a fraternity house. And so when our clients call us and they say, hey, I want you to go find me a person who is doing this job at one of my competitors, you're going to get the same type of person. You're not going to get new ideas or innovation. You're not going to get a woman, most likely. And so it's challenging. Now, we do have a lot of clients that will say, find me someone who can do this at a competitor who's a woman, because we don't have any women on our team. That's not the type of direction I want. But I want to know, like, what do you need out of this person? Do you need someone who is analytical? Do you need someone who's empathetic, maybe? Do you need someone who's strategic? So it is all about, it starts with the recruiting process, but even before that, like, what is your strategy? Because if it's just poaching from competitors, you're not going to diversify your culture the way you want to.
Yeah, such good points. Love that. I know earlier in the webinar, we mentioned how leadership plays such a big role in maintaining culture, shaping culture. But I'm curious, how can leaders be trained to better support and enhance workplace culture? And what have you guys seen be like helpful for leaders?
Yeah, I can jump in first, just because I have to speak on this because I do come from a leadership training organization, so it's very dear to my heart. But I think there's so many things here, and one, I'll just say that I think we often forget about the human skills that enable people to be their best selves at work. And when it comes to leaders, because this role typically with leaderships and execs, it's like really imperative that they're strategic, that they are disciplined, that they are able to make quick decisions with limited information. All of those skills are extremely important. But how you make your employees feel is just as important when it comes to making sure that you're getting the best out of your people. And at Life Labs, we teach what we call life's most useful skills, which are really those skills that are not only helpful for driving performance, increasing retention, yada, 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 but also just generally how to communicate better with humans, how to be a better human being, how to lead with curiosity versus assumptions. And that in itself is such a powerful, those are powerful skills. And a lot of people then call them soft skills, but I think they're anything but soft. They are so essential and core to what we do. And I think in terms of training leaders on them, a lot of the times organizations will come to us and will say, hey, we want our managers to learn those people management skills that they need to be really good people managers, which great, amazing. And what are your leaders learning as well? Because they need to be the ones that are exemplifying that behavior, because leaders have what we call signal setting actions. They set the signal of what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, what is important, what isn't important. So your leaders are just so important for setting that culture and setting that standard. And frankly, if other employees see leaders doing things that are not necessarily what we want the rest of the organization to be doing, there's no reason that they should do any differently, because the leaders are the most successful people in the organization. If success is, not including people in the decision-making process, or not, leading with curiosity, or not asking questions when I don't know something, that's what other people will do. So making sure that you can train your leaders on those core behaviors is so important. And then teaching them how to role model those things well. So where in the organization can I make sure that I am publicly using these tools? Reinforcing those things. So do we have manager expectations? Do we have leadership expectations that help hold others accountable? And when a manager enters our organization, are we actually saying, here's the expectations of what it means to be a really great manager here? We're going to give you those skills, and then we're going to continue to measure your progress on how you're actually doing in those things, because they're that important. And then also creating opportunities for reflection. I think as organizations, we don't talk enough about what leadership really is and about the importance of it and what it looks like. And being able to have those conversations in an organic way, either in our all hands events or different formats such as like manager meetups or whatever it might be. What an awesome opportunity that we have companies where we can come into and just talk about like, here's what it means to be a leader. Here's what I like being, this is what I like about being a leader. So creating those moments of reflection can just be such a great way to ingrain that learning and be able to have a more reflective culture in general.
This is brilliant. Yeah, so many like good points. I was wow, and you're in your zone, Joey. That was amazing. Thank you so much. No, it was. I was thinking about the reflection pieces you said. Like it's an all-rounded approach. I'll give an example. A couple of years ago, I was part of leadership development program for one of the largest employers in Egypt. Massive structure, over 15,000 people employed there. And the leadership program was basically for the top people, right? So these were chief of the different divisions, like areas that I've never even heard in my life. And I was part of this coaching and mentoring kind of support. And was funny enough, when we had this kind of very structured 35, 40 minutes chat, so right, it's very straight to the point. And one would assume that these leaders have coaches, they have mentors. Literally one of them, and there were a group of 15, one of them had actually worked previously with actually formal coach, leadership coach. So all of the others were like self-taught, right? And when I was starting the conversation, obviously I asked them about their work, and they feel very much in their zone. They're very strategic. They're, talking with all the different jargon, the terminology and everything. And then at some stage, I'm like, okay, let's pause. Tell me more about how you manage your life and your work. And then you see a complete different person in front of you, from someone that is incredibly confident, knowing the in and out of their organization, of their people, everything, literally the kind of exemplary leader, to when you actually go on a human level, how they're lacking this confidence, how they're living with imposter syndrome every single day, how they are shaken because they don't receive formal training and they're expected to be this, as Joey said, everyone is looking at you. You are on the stage constantly, and you need to be this kind of strong personality, regardless of male, female, age, nothing really matters. You are the leader, right? And it was fascinating in this 15 minutes of the 35-minute session, when they open up and when you show them a little bit of empathy, how much they actually take benefit out of that. And the feedback was fascinating, that they never actually focus on these human skills, these human power skills, not soft skills, that the Joy was talking about. They don't get that a lot. They are not taught, to Charlie's point from earlier, they're not taught how to give feedback. They're just expected to be good communicators. That's it.
Mm-hmm. So many good points. I'm like taking notes on what both of you ladies mentioned. I just want to offer a very simple solution, because I know not a lot of companies are in a financial position to really invest in coaches for their team or sign on for a formal L&D program. One of the things that we have done is, we make it interesting for them. And an example of this is at a company meeting, we may spend 30 minutes listening to a Brene Brown TED Talk, or I may, share an Adam Grant or Simon Sinek podcast. And not to say that's what everyone chooses to listen to, but I'm not asking you to read a business book and annotate it. Like, listen to this conversation, because this is how we want you to act and show up. So I think a lot of times it can just be very simple things. In fact, Radina, the CEO from Airbnb, just did a great podcast. I think it was How I Built This. He was interviewed on that, and like probably 10 people on my team listened to it because we shared it out based on their role and what they could learn from it. So yeah, maybe just don't think that you have to stay traditional and in the box. There's a lot of ways to educate people and influence them and inspire them at the same time.
Love that. It doesn't have to be super complicated. There's easy ways to always be learning and growing. So I know we're close to time, so I'm going to go ahead and launch our live Q&A session. So if anyone listening has any questions they want this panel to answer, please drop those in the chat now. In the meantime, we have some that were submitted earlier, so I'm going to ask a couple of those. But to start, one of our first questions we have, I'm going to go back to presenter view here. Don't know what happened there. So I'm curious if you guys could share an example. This was submitted earlier. They want you to share an example of a specific initiative that has improved workplace culture. So if you have any specific stories to share, that'd be great. I'll give you a moment to think about it. I know I put you on the spot with that one.
I mean, I'll share a lot. I'll share a crazy one that people will for sure judge me for, but I'm okay with that. So when we decided to close our office in 2020 or 2021, we made a strategic decision to buy out our rent, but then also to take the additional savings and invest it back in connection. And so we had 2 years in a row, and I'm hopeful that we'll bring it back when the economy picks up. But we took our entire team to Mexico for 3 days or 3 nights and 4 days. And the rule was you cannot bring your laptop. And this is one, a reward for the hard work and what we've all been through, but it's two, just bond. Like there was nothing forced about it. I will say the first year we went into it, we had all these like Olympic games and, trivia, and we thought we had to keep people entertained. And then the second year, everyone's like, we just want to be with each other. And I cannot measure the ROI that those 3 nights in Mexico gave our team, but I will tell you that it connected everyone in a way, like by choice, it connected them. And so I think things like that don't feel forced, that are not all business or even at all business, just, bringing people together in settings where they're going to enjoy getting to know each other and not feel like it's something they have to do, but something they get to do.
That's very cool. I wish I could go for 3 days in Mexico for that. Lovely example. I guess one thing, and I'm really trying to think about the book. I think it was called Play, or The Importance of Play. One thing that I brought to a very successful startup in Africa last year that was already getting a lot of investment. So they were like wondering what to do, but it's a very challenging market, and the kind of attitude to work is complicated. The young generation wants to work all in tech. They are demanding, but then the culture itself is not very focused on the people. It's much more focused on the profit and the results. It is what it is, right? Plus, on top, we have religious complexity as well. But one thing that I actually did, so I flew over to the country, and we organized very similar to what Charlie said in terms of games and activities. And I kid you not, I have never, ever seen them, and I worked with them for over 6 months. I've never seen them happier, because you bring the child in them, and you bring this, Joey was talking about the psychological safety and how important it is to feel that you can speak up, that you can be yourself, that there is no judgment. They were playing like 6 years old, and we're talking about age bracket from, 22 to 40. Literally, they were running around, giving each other sticky notes, super competitive. Then we got them some, like basic donuts and sweets. Like, people love food. Everyone loves food. So that's the kind of unifying component. And they actually embedded this as kind of monthly games for the entire office, and they have 3 offices in this country, so each office is competing, and then they have like a tournament, the top 2 offices. So it's such a small thing with super small resources. It was literally time and some ideation, but now you have ChatGPT. You can ask questions and you can get some ideas, and it really nurtured this togetherness. Now, this is office-based interaction, right? So it probably won't work for hybrid and remote, but it was just fascinating how much when you channel the inner child, how much excitement it can be. I think it's called Play. Yeah, the book. Yeah, definitely worth reading.
Love those examples. Those are great. I'll have to look up that book. So we have one last question before we wrap things up, because I know we're coming up on time. But the other question that was submitted was, how can companies address and reshape a toxic workplace culture? So that one's, I'm sure, a little harder to answer. So curious what you guys have for that one.
Regina, I know you had some thoughts. I'll just say that we need to be thinking about toxic cultures as truly something that is spreading and contagious in a bad way versus a difficult employee. I've worked with plenty of difficult employees that have potential, and there's something that is lacking in the relationship that they need, whether it is feedback or, the heart-to-heart or the pep talk. But you got to think of those different. I think a lot of times if someone's difficult, we just start calling them toxic. But in my opinion, toxic spreads, and that's what you need to prevent. And the easiest way to do that is to nip it in the bud as soon as you can.
Yeah, I'll just share something that I've been researching over the past 2 years is organizational resilience. And there's this component of resilience, which is what I call like ethos of an organization. And ethos and culture are somewhat interchangeable, but slightly different. And I think at the end of the day, ethos is generally the feeling of an organization. It's how do I feel when I'm at work? How does it feel to be a part of this? What feelings does my work have on me? And what feelings does the organization have as a whole? And you can shape your ethos just like you can shape your culture. And I think the challenging part of this is that oftentimes there's multiple things at play here. There's individuals, there's systems, and then there's just the general way that those two things feed together, which creates that organizational culture. And I think when it comes to toxic workplace culture, it's really about understanding where that's coming from. Because I think it's hard to define what toxic workplace culture is. What does that even really mean? Does it mean that people can't communicate with one another? Does it mean that there's a general level of distrust? What does it look like? And then also understanding what great looks like for that organization, because each organization has a different ethos. And, Charlie's organization is not necessarily going to be the same ethos as Radina's organization, but two things can be great, and they can be great for different reasons, just like two things can be toxic and be toxic for different reasons. So I think being able to define what do we want our culture to really be and what do we want to make people feel at the end of the day is so important to being able to tread a path forward and really be able to shape our culture to be that. Because without defining success, we can't really know where we're going. And without identifying what is blocking us from getting there, there's no way for us to identify the path forward. So I think doing a lot of investigative work, which I know Regina has a lot of experience in with her psych background, but just being able to understand, what are the variables at play here, and then being able to understand what specific initiatives we need to do to get there.
I couldn't agree more. I think this is such an imperative order of things. And as Charlie said as well, going to the root cause, really analyzing where is that coming from? Why is it coming from? But I find it incredibly challenging working particularly with founders of businesses, right? And they take pride in everything that they're doing. And when they hire people, unfortunately, a lot of the times they hire based on gut feeling, based on recommendations, based on, they see fantastic LinkedIn profile or fantastic CV, and then immediately they're biased and they bring someone on board who ends up being toxic. And I keep telling them one bad egg can spoil the rest. Absolutely. And it's the case of providing some numbers as well. I find it better when you actually bring numbers into the game. So let's say if you hire someone with very strategic impact, like a sales director, right? In a small structure, that's basically the golden egg, right? So that's golden goose. And you need to be very cautious as to how you navigate the journey. As Charlie said, there is a big difference between someone being difficult and someone being toxic. And it's not like all of a sudden you have 15 toxic people and then your culture is toxic. There are a lot of elements that contribute to that, right? So analysis is one part of the deal, but really talking numbers in the sense of, if we make a wrong decision and this person makes several other people leave, or we have a 10% drop of productivity, these are the numbers that you're going to see. These are the figures in terms of actual dollar impact. So when you talk to the business people with their own numbers game, which, yeah, it took me quite some time to understand that language. It's like someone talking in Chinese. But the minute you start bringing the numbers back in the game, they start listening. Otherwise, it's, oh, this person, and we need to accommodate, and we need to give feedback, and we need to create pips and whatnot. So I think there is a there isn't a shortcut, but there is a longer path and a bit shorter path.
Thank you for sharing all of your experience on that. Yeah, those were great answers. So I know we're coming up on the end of the webinar, so we're going to wrap things up. Before we end, I want to just thank the panel for sharing such great insights and strategies. There's so many great nuggets of information throughout this webinar, so I can't wait to write a recap, share it with everyone who missed it. If you are here live with us today, you are pre-registered for our upcoming episodes, so you don't have to do anything on your end. But I'll introduce our upcoming sessions. So we have measuring engagement, tools and metrics that matter, which will be coming in October. We have the digital workplace trends and innovations coming in November. And then we have enhancing engagement strategies for better digital experience coming in December. And we will have more episodes after that, but just wanted to highlight these next three. Like I said at the beginning of the webinar, if you have colleagues or peers who would find this valuable, please share it with them so they can register and join us next time. I'll share the link one more time in the chat for you guys. Yeah, that's it. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll see you all on our next episode in October. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone. All the best.